Do you feel distant from God because of the suffering you see in the world and are left wondering why he could allow such terrible things to happen? Do you feel at times that God is not mindful of you, that your prayers are falling on deaf ears, and that he must not love you like he does other people because of some circumstance you recall from your past? Have you been taught to fear God, causing you to live a life of superstition and anxiety? It can be uncomfortable to face the truth about the origin of your faith. Maybe you take pride in the story and tradition of your fear-filled heart, but deep down you know that something feels off when it comes to your relationship with God. There is a part of you that believes in God, but the things you see happening in the world create a tug of war between your growing doubt and weakening faith. You have an ember burning inside, but the surrounding storm threatens to put it out. What if I told you that you can get it right with God, that understanding God and his character changes everything else in your life? Your belief in God is meant to change and grow. It's meant to evolve into a true and full understanding of who he really is. If this belief doesn't change, your life won't change. First off, we need to clean out the cupboards and wipe down the countertops. We need to expel the false ideas you have about God. This can take time if you have deeply rooted, intertwined, and complicated contradictions that you can't seem to shake. Guess what? That's okay. God waits. He's the perfect father. Think of a person who has been so kind and loving to you. A mom, a grandma, an uncle, a stranger. Let the image of their kindness and grace be a reflection of how you see God moving forward. Your current view may be tainted by an authority figure in your life, an emotionally unstable parent whose wrath you felt at each turn, a cold-hearted friend who is too distracted by their own insecurities to give a thought to your suffering, a pastor or preacher who uses fear and scriptures out of context to drive you into obedience to the commandments of God. In each of these cases, your idea and view of God is influenced. We sometimes don't like to admit to the sources that influence our lives, or the types of things that motivate us towards certain behaviors. Fear of God was planted in your heart with unhealthy beliefs that overlap with truth, like crossed electrical wires. The sparks these wires create are the wrong kind of fire to keep lit in your heart. Your relationship to authority figures is a heavy motivator in shaping the images created in your mind of who God is, and ultimately, who you are. However, when you learn who God is, how he loves you, how he moves about in his glory and his true nature, this changes the way you see yourself. When you understand how God sees you and that he is kind and loving, then you can liberate yourself from unhealthy views that lead you to sabotage opportunities to accept and love yourself. For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, not to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. There may be a part of you that is afraid to change the way you view God. In doing so, and in choosing to stand in a brighter light, this vulnerability might expose some of the darker parts of your life. But, as we will explore further, when this added light comes into your life, darkness runs away and the space that is left is filled with the gift of healing. You tend to see yourself through the lens of how you think others are thinking of you. There is a famous saying, "I'm not who you think I am. I'm not who I think I am. I am what I think you think I am." In other words, we are a reflection of the person we see through someone else's eyes. Our identity is based on how we want to be or not be perceived by others. Ultimately, when we realize that the way others see us is different from how we initially perceived, our attitudes and behaviors change. There is likely evidence of this in your own life. Imagine a time you felt that you deserved to be punished, but instead you were shown love. Just look at the example of Jesus' interaction with the woman adulterer. We catch a glimpse of the nature of God. This woman is faced with heavy judgment. Try to see what must be going on inside her head. She likely had an internal dialogue that included phrases like, "I'm worthless," "I'm a sinner," "I'm no good," "I'm better off dead," "No one loves me," "No one sees me," "I'm not worthy." Thoughts that surely make one feel guilty, ashamed, and low. But here we have Jesus, the embodied Son of God, who said in the book of John, "The Son can do nothing but what he sees the Father doing." We see him lower himself to the ground before her, and in a crowd of her fiercest accusers, extend kindness. The woman is seen for who she is. Not seen for what she has done, she receives grace, she receives mercy. She receives a chance to change and choose differently. The judgment and sentencing with which she condemned herself was enough. Instead of being condemned further, she was given freedom and kindness. She was granted deliverance from her accusers and from herself. Jesus said, "Go and sin no more." To you who suffer openly or in silence, Jesus says the same. When you catch yourself on the sidelines of someone else's mistakes or misdeeds, may you turn to the example of Jesus in this story and extend grace and mercy. You can taste this level of love in all things as promised, when Jesus says, "My doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. If any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine, whether it be of God, or whether I speak of myself." John 7:16-17. If you want to experience a life of abundant love and grace, then do the things that Jesus taught and walk the path that he paved. In doing this, you change your life by knowing the truth, because you can taste it, you can feel it. Why does it seem so difficult to change the way we view God and our beliefs? Does it give you anxiety to imagine that you have viewed God incorrectly or too harshly? These anxieties are all whispers from your fear. Sometimes the most clarity we have in our life comes in the form of fear. We know exactly the things that scare us, that hurt us, that make us sad. We have an overflowing of clarity on the things we don't want to happen in our lives. But what if we can change that? What if we can find abundant clarity on the things that bring us peace, comfort, and joy? What if the phrase, "Oh my God," was a phrase that preceded wonder, praise, and glory, instead of sarcasm, terror, and pain? When we take counsel from our fears, we step into a state of creating worst-case scenarios, assigning meaning to unintended offenses, and a host of other negative outcomes. Fear is a creative storyteller and the ultimate salesman. It can convince and persuade you to believe some crazy things that aren't true. What's worse is it can be used by ourselves and others to ignore the truth and the light. Your fears offer insecurity and uncertainty around God. They place limits on your ability to create greater outcomes in your life because they starve your belief in God's strength and presence. The invitation for you is to open your belief in God, if only just a little, to accept the idea that he is more kind and more loving than you have imagined, that he has more for you than you can understand. He has been there with you in good and difficult times and wants you to know him better, to create a life within the abundant circle of his glory. So now that you have a taste for what we are discussing when it comes to creating a skewed image and understanding of God, let's see if we can find a few examples of ways we can view him differently. We have discussed the prodigal son in a previous video and encourage you to watch it to dive deeper into this beautiful illustration of God. However, a key point from this story that is pivotal in your life, as it was in the life of the wayward son, is the moment he changes course and points his path back in the direction of home. Surely he felt that he would need to convince his father to let him return home and find a way to earn his love again. Surely, to his shock and delight, was how openly and warmly he was received upon returning. He was celebrated with no mention of his previous actions. Let us not forget the son who stayed by the side of the father, even in the feelings of injustice and jealousy. The understanding father reassured him that all is well. All that he had was for the son. In a world of zero-sum games, where there is often a winner and a loser on any matter of interactions and dealings, it can be difficult to comprehend the immense love that a being like God has. He loves purely and is merciful and graceful. This means that he has a love that stands as a replacement for expected criticism, punishment, and abandonment, a type of love that understands that when we fall short, fail, or suffer in pain, what we most need is compassion to be lifted from our fallen station. There is an undeniable power that flows to us when we give and when we receive this type of love. Both the giving and the receiving take a little vulnerability and humility. To give love is to offer a part of yourself to someone else who may or may not receive it. But it can take an equal or sometimes greater amount of vulnerability and humility to receive love, to accept or ask for help from another who offers a part of themselves to us. We find a glowing example of love from one of the last moments with Jesus in what is called the Last Supper. During this small gathering, Jesus begins washing the feet of his closest friends. Peter, his top disciple, meets this gesture with resistance. He asks if Jesus is planning on washing his feet also, and rejects the offer, assuming it isn't necessary. Jesus responds by saying, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Peter promptly replies, "Okay, not just my feet, but my hands and my head also." In this example, we see Jesus, their teacher, their leader, showing an example of humility and service. But as we learn from Peter, it takes humility to receive love and service from another, even from God. How often are we, out of pride or in not wanting to inconvenience another, rejecting the offer of love we receive? Here, in another example, we find the story of the Good Samaritan. Jesus used this story to illustrate the nature of heaven. When asked by a lawyer what someone must do to receive eternal life, Jesus replied with a question. "What is written in the law?" The lawyer responded, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." And then he asked, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus then illustrated the concept of loving your neighbor in a way that his eager audience could not misunderstand. He told a story of a Jewish man who had been robbed, beaten, and left for dead along a path. Two Jewish men passed by the dying man on separate occasions and walked past the man in pity. They each continue on their journey without stopping to help. A third man came walking down the path, a Samaritan. The Jews and the Samaritans were constantly at conflict with each other, and it would have been known and commonplace that you don't help out your enemies. The Samaritan carefully aids the Jewish man who had been left for dead. He dresses his wounds and places him on his own donkey and leads him down to an inn. He then asks the innkeeper to care for the man and leaves him with money to do so. He then says if he spends all the money, that he will return to pay off any debt to make the man whole. In this loving example of kindness and careful aid to an enemy, Jesus illustrates an elevated view of what heaven is like. Heaven is not a place of division and self-righteousness. It is a place where one's affiliations are not more important than the soul of the person in need. If we are to begin to taste and create an atmosphere of heaven around us, as Jesus did, this is how it is done. To love even your enemies, to treat others as you would want to be treated, and to see others the way God sees them. This is the divine heritage of God. To receive a life that is eternal, or in a state of life like that of God's, we are to love. Without this love, we won't know what a life with God can be. You may be wondering, but what about when I feel angry, depressed, and distant from God? There are times when it can be difficult to feel God, to feel kindness towards ourselves and others. So how do we recenter ourselves when our visions are blurred by the dust clouds, stirred up by our wandering faith? How do we draw from the well within ourselves to cool the warming tension swelling in our chest? Jesus said if we remember him, we will have his spirit with us. So the important thing is to simply remember, remembering him as our primary response to difficulty and stress, instead of alternative responses that we are conditioned to using. Especially in times when we feel wronged or injured by another, responses like lashing out, using hurtful words, or inflicting retribution, these increase the suffering we may be experiencing, which add and multiply our heightened emotional state. But what is it about Jesus that we are to remember? Reflect on your situation. How did Jesus act in situations where he was wronged by others? He bore embarrassment, public shaming, and mocking. He descended below our deepest pains. He understands this pain in its sharpest, most cutting form. Yet despite the physical and emotional pain, he showed kindness. He was betrayed with a kiss from someone who should have been one of his most loyal friends. In that moment, Peter, who stood guard to protect Jesus, struck the ear of a soldier who was seeking to take Jesus into custody. But here, at this pivotal moment, the ministry of Jesus under siege, he extends a hand of miraculous healing on the officer's ear to make it whole once again. He then turned and peacefully walked closer to the moment of his eventual death, with a purpose greater than any could imagine, to courageously fulfill his mission. And as he looked down from the cross at those same accusers who delighted in his sentencing, and those who mocked him, he uttered, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." Imagine his kind words of forgiveness, while bruised, blooded, and suffering in intense pain. He, bearing all, would go to the depths of it for the chance to lift you out of your own pain and suffering. Let's briefly return to the wounded soldier, who in an instant went from sudden pain to miraculous healing, a shocking sequence. Maybe he stood guard at the feet of Jesus, having witnessed a kindness and grace unlike anything he'd ever imagined. Feeling some sense of wonder and awe at the man who would soon die, his heart must have been filled with love. Having experienced something he never knew he longed for, he felt seen and shared a special moment meant just for him. Even though he had a duty to fulfill, a task he would never fully understand, he played a part in one of the last miracles of Jesus' ministry. As he watched Jesus gasp for his final breath, a tear streaming down his face, a resolve placed in his heart to share this experience and this love with others. A love and light he didn't expect to feel under these circumstances, but with a power able to cast out any trace of darkness or guilt. The forgiveness he received from Jesus' dread and bloodied lips would be a lasting testimony in his heart. This loving example of Jesus will help you take courage. It can raise you through the pain and help you find compassion and healing for yourself and others. The pain you feel can lead to the healing and aid of another who struggles on their path. Instead of the pain burying you in a wall of fog and dismay, this very pain can be an instrument to allow you to play a beautiful harmony, to lift and guide others towards an experience with God. You can be the hands of God, to reach out and comfort those who are broken, and to mourn with those in sadness, and to heal those who feel torn. By learning who God is, you can recognize ways that He is already present in a fallen world. You'll recognize the ways He is lifting you up in seemingly small and simple ways. You will recognize that love is His language, and kindness is His signature, and can learn from Him. You will grow this knowledge by speaking His language of love and showing kindness to others. In doing so, you are learning who He is and are rewarded with the sweet taste of heaven right here and now. You become a creator of heaven on earth and build a haven and a sanctuary for others to expand and share in on this love. This restores healing from hurt, peace from pain, and joy from sadness. Your struggles, your challenges, your failures can and will be repurposed to multiply fulfillment and joy in your life and the lives of those around you.